I guess I have to. So, yeah, okay. The topic of this talk is going beyond scientific and religious dogmas and discovering the truth. Yeah, everyone, please sit.
Do you mind coming forward?
I come forward. All right. Is this not loud enough? Put it out. Let's start again. The topic of this talk is going beyond scientific and religious dogmas and discovering the truth. So, one way man is distinguished from the animals is that people have a worldview. We operate according to a worldview. Everyone needs a moral, ethical, directional compass by which to lead their life. Some people are committed to a religion, some people are committed to atheism, some people are committed to making lots of money, some people are committed to research, some people are committed to their family. We may have multi-commitments, but we have an outlook on life, even if we don't specifically formulate that. Some people have a formulated worldview, just like I am a Christian that has a whole worldview that goes with it. I am an atheist that has a worldview that goes with it. Most people don't have a formulated worldview, but they have goals in life. To make money or to live comfortably. They have what they consider to be morals, to work hard, enjoy yourself. In every worldview there is some kind of faith, because you can't know everything about anything, whatever it may be. Whatever we do, whatever we think, whatever we goals, they're based on some kind of faith. Just like, for instance, the idea, let me work hard, that's based on the idea that by doing so, I will be doing the right thing for myself and my community and my country. So there's some inbuilt faith there. Religious faith is generally known as dogma, which is, the word dogma is often a derogatory term. An example of religious dogma is that which I was taught in school and in church when I was young. I don't know if it's still taught in the schools and in the church. The church. In Northern Ireland, if you say the church, then the question comes, which church? Anyway, I was told, or was led to believe, that all the problems in the world, all the suffering we see, all the inequality, all the cruelty, all the pain, all the disease, all stems from the fact that an ancestor of ours long ago ate an apple. And this was taught as religious education. That is, by people who don't believe that, that is called a dogma. So, over the last few hundred years, many people have become discontent with what they consider to be religious dogma, and especially at the present time, there is a worldwide movement against religious dogma, with the idea that we should be more rational and try and understand what's going in the world through observation and intelligence, and especially through science. But then we find that people who subscribe to what they would call the scientific worldview, they also, inadvertently maybe, adopt a dogma with the idea that by science we can understand everything that needs to be known. By science we can understand what is reality, based on the dogma, on the unproved and unprovable assumption that we can access reality through our senses and our intelligence. By observation and hypothesis, we can understand everything that needs to be, or everything that exists. Reality can be understood by the scientific method, by observation and hypothesis. And then there should follow experimentation, but in some cases it's not possible, as for instance with the hypothesis that the whole universe came out of a Big Bang. It's not possible to make an experiment to attempt to replicate that. So whatever worldview we subscribe to, we become attached to it because we need to see the world through some kind of explanation. Unlike animals, humans don't just eat and sleep and pass something out of their backsides and reproduce. Humans are supposed to be thinking. Homo sapiens, sapiens means sapient, intelligent. But we can't know everything about anything. I want to speak about knowing everything about everything. And so we tend to adopt a worldview without knowing everything about it, nor is it possible to know everything about anything. And most people who call themselves religious, they don't know what the theology of their religion is beyond some very basic points. The catechism used to be taught, but the religious discussion, the theological discussion that goes behind that, most people are unaware of it. For most people, they're simply content to go to a church and say, I'm a Christian, or I'm a Protestant, or I'm a Catholic, or whatever. And similarly, there are many people who do not consider themselves religious, and they think, well, science has it all worked out for us, but they don't know what the scientific proofs are of the things that they believe in. Just like, and of course, we have to speak in very broad terms here, because many people, they subscribe both to a scientific come religious worldview. For instance, about the Big Bang, which is widely accepted as being the cause of the universe. There are very few people who understand all the reasoning or behind that, but most people just accept it. So for the people who don't understand the reasoning behind it, it can be considered dogmatic acceptance that there was a Big Bang, and gradually everything fell into place, and here we all are. And even those who do accept it, they tend to accept it dogmatically. That means that although the scientific outlook is supposed to be neutral and value-free, but people latch onto it as people latch onto religious dogmas, because we all need a worldview by which to live. We can't do without that. So we tend to want to believe whatever supports our worldview and to disbelieve whatever appears to, or whatever anyone offers as a contradiction. even though we don't know everything to back it up, and there may be some serious objections to it, but we feel, different people feel attracted to different kind of dogmas, we can say. I'll give an example. Who has read The God Delusion? Well-known book of the modern age. The God Delusion, right? You read it, yeah. Okay. Now, among the various arguments that he gave, I found one argument, which wasn't a major argument of his, but I found it very, very weak and almost childish in its weakness. He related an incident from his own childhood, where in the night he saw something moving on the curtains in his bedroom, and he was afraid, thinking that it was a ghost. And you remember reading that? You probably don't, it's a big book. And then he got up and saw it was just some light reflected from outside, and there was no ghost there at all. And from then on, he didn't believe in ghosts. Now, I thought it was a very weak argument, considering that throughout history, all cultures, even those which have not been connected with each other, they have all reported ghosts. People have, at least they say, seen and experienced ghosts. And even in the modern age, there was, I believe it was in the 1970s, there was a Delta Airlines flight from somewhere in the southern USA to someone in Latin America, which Delta Airlines, even though it was a profitable route, they had to cancel that flight because none of their staff would fly on it because there was a ghost in the flight. Because one of the planes crashed and the captain kept on coming on the flight, the ghost of the captain, and there's a best-selling book about it. I mean, that's just one example. So, I'm not making a case here for ghosts or against ghosts. I'm just saying that the way he flippantly tossed out the very conception or possibility that ghosts could exist without any rigid scientific investigation suggests that he's also attached to a dogma. People have worldviews and they're attached to that, and by any means they want to uphold that. And we also tend to want to share that with others also, to bolster our own confidence in our worldview. And I guess you could say I'm doing the same thing here. Well, let's see what you think. So, Dawkins, he's attached to a materialistic worldview. Whether or not there's God and whether or not there are ghosts, the two are not exactly linked, but it's the materialistic worldview of science. By materialistic, I don't mean here getting lots of money and getting a big house and dressing in fancy clothes, but I mean the a priori rejection of the possibility of there being anything beyond matter. Matter is all there is. There is no supernatural or spiritual dimension. So that is one kind of dogma, if you like, because, well, why not? Again, that so many people throughout history have reported that spiritual experience, mystic experiences. Of course, that's the whole point of the God delusion. He considers it to be a delusion. There have been experiments in which electromagnetic waves are applied to the brain, and people, by having that applied to different parts of the brain, they feel hunger, thirst, depression. They can also have mystic or spiritual experiences. But interestingly, one of the main researcher in this one, Dr. Ramachandran in San Diego, because people could have mystic or theistic experiences, he suggested that this doesn't mean that it's just something in the brain, but it suggests that it's something real. Because the fact that we feel hunger it's a real response to a real need. And so he suggested that the brain is a mechanism through which the self experiences consciousness. Anyway, I won't go down that alley. Now, scientific dogma. I spoke a little bit about religious dogma. I'm speaking more about what I'm calling scientific dogma, because the topic of religious, generally dogma, the term is associated with religion. But I just want to point out here, because it's not often pointed out, that there is what we might call scientific dogma also. We're generally taught that, well, science means we know what we're talking about, and we got it all worked out. If we haven't got it worked out, we're on the way to getting it worked out. The scientific outlook is that materialistic, that everything we know everything in reality can be understood through observation and through hypothesis, by human endeavor, by exercising human intelligence. But this to me seems to be a very unreasonable premise. Why should we presume that everything in reality is accessible to our senses and understandable by our intelligence, by the method of observation? Why should we presume that? Why should we presume that anything that can't be quantified or measured, it's just some fairy stories? Why should we presume that? Scientific dogma, I'll give an example from my childhood. In school, in biology class, I was taught that simple cells and particularly simple cells are very simple organisms, and very soon scientists will be able to make cells in a laboratory. Later, quite a few years later, I was told that when I was discussing this with someone, so no, that's not true. Scientists might have thought that once, but now they know that cells, I'm talking here about organic cells, as such as we find in bodies, plants, and so on. I was told, no, that's not true. The scientists now know that cells are far more complex than they had originally presumed. And that's where that was the starting point for the intelligent design vector of many scientists. So, and then after that, even after that, quite some time after that, I discovered that not only had scientists rejected what they at one time thought to be science in this regard, that cells are very simple organisms that will soon be able to be artificially replicated in the laboratory. Not only did I discover that was no longer considered valid science, but I also discovered that at the time that I was taught it, scientists already knew that it wasn't valid science. So why did they teach it to me? Well, I guess it takes time for the scientific discoveries to filter down into the curriculum. But in the meantime, I was taught something which scientists knew to be untrue, and I was taught it in the name of science. In this regard, just another anecdote. Some years ago at a science conference, I met a scientist, and I had some discussion with him about on the topic that life cannot arise from matter. And I presumed that he would not agree with that. I presumed that he would say that yes, life does arise from matter. But he laughed when I said this, saying, we already know that. We know that life can't arise from matter. I don't know I didn't ask him at the time who he meant by we. So I asked him, why do you still teach it? And he said, well, we don't have anything else to teach. We don't have anything better to teach. So this is what we might call scientific dogma, that we are attached to a certain worldview and we don't want to admit the weaknesses in it or that we are ignorant about certain things, and so we just go on teaching it. Now, presumably everyone here accepts that subatomic particles exist. Anyone want to make a case against it? I don't want to argue for or against it because I don't know what would be considered proof of the existence of subatomic particles. Does anyone here know what would be considered proof of the existence of subatomic particles? Anyone? Anyone? No. But everyone agrees that subatomic particles exist. No one objects to that. So we all accept, that means, it seems, that we all accept on faith that subatomic particles exist. Isn't it? If we don't know the proof, then we accept on faith. We believe what scientists tell us, that subatomic particles exist. And it seems that they gradually go on discovering more and more. So, most people, they accept whatever we accept in terms of scientific discovery or what we believe to be science, we accept it on faith because scientists tell us so. So in other words, we could call it a dogmatic faith. Now, there's a problem in science. There are many problems in science. But one major problem arises when we see that different groups of scientists, both with access to the same scientific discoveries and information, and both trained in the same basic scientific method, and both highly qualified, come to completely different and opposing conclusions. And I specifically have in mind the theory of evolution. Of course, there are different stages of evolution. That the universe has come into being by chance or not chance, or by some singularity. The universe has come into being, that living beings have evolved from matter, that from very simple living beings have evolved more complex beings. That is one outlook of, there's the standard outlook of scientists, orthodox scientists, who have much data, much information, much research to refer to, and they're also trained to process and understand the research materials, which probably, or maybe none of us here are. We may be taught in a very simple way in school, but to understand all the intricacies of it, I don't know if anyone understands all the intricacies. You'd have to be a geologist and a biologist, geneticist, and so many. It's interdisciplinary. But there are other scientists who have studied the same data. They have the same information available, and they're also highly qualified and respected in their fields, and they come to the conclusion that it's too complex to have arisen by random interaction of chemicals in the beginning, and later by what is called natural selection. They subscribe to the theory of intelligent design, which borders or practically is theism. So, for a layman like myself, I'm not a scientist, as anyone who's even slightly a scientist must have already deduced. For a layman like me, it strongly suggests that what is called science is really not as scientific or not as sure about itself as is claimed to be. I mean, individuals may be sure. Richard Dawkins, for instance, one among many, is sure that we are all here today as a result of biological evolution. And there are other scientists who are equally convinced that this is not possible. So, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about something that's fixed, clear, understood, as sure as day follows night and night follows day, as sure as 2 + 2 = 4, as sure as death? Or are we talking about some opinions? Are we talking about some dogmas? What does it come down to? Is it someone is doing good science, someone is doing bad science? What we're talking about for sure is the human factor, that different people interpret in different ways. And for the layman who doesn't have a lifetime to spend, and not everyone has the intelligence or the inclination to study all these things, he simply has to accept one or the other on faith or remain an agnostic about all these things. For the layman, if one scientist says evolution, and the other one says no, it's intelligent design, which may have preceded evolution, then for the layman, which means most people in the world, there's no way that they can navigate their way through all of this and come to an intelligent conclusion, because the scientists themselves disagree. Science is not as definite as we are led to believe. Some years ago I read in a magazine that among astrophysicists there are about 2,000 theories, including sub-theories, of the origin of the universe. And I thought, well, how many astrophysicists are there in the world? Probably no more than 2,000. I discussed this with an astrophysicist, and she said, well, maybe there aren't even that many, but some of them have more than one theory. Smart people come up with more than one theory. And of course, most of them would be sub-theories or main theories. So, it's very difficult to navigate our way through all this stuff. Now, another point, getting into another point here, is that everyone in the world, even those who deny that there is anything beyond the physical, everyone accepts that there is something metaphysical. For instance, I don't think anyone, any humanist or atheist or religionist or whatever they may be, even if they're not an ist of any kind, they're just someone working and trying to earn a living, no one would agree, for instance, that to torture children is something good. Anyone want to make a case for torturing children is good? Some people might make a case that torture has some use in some cases, although that's highly debatable. But it's very difficult to make a case for torturing children. It's bad, it's evil. Now, what is this good and bad? if we are all simply, if we as human beings are all simply a bundle of chemicals, and what's good or bad about anything? This dust thou art, unto dust thou shalt return. This is not a religious statement, it's simply a statement about the body, that the body is formed from indiscriminate matter, and it returns, matter forms into a body, and during the duration of the existence of the body, it continues to transform at every moment, and eventually that body, which we tend to think of as myself, it dies, and then the body, unless it's mummified or in other ways preserved, it tends to very quickly merge with the greater mass of matter. It may be eaten by worms, it may be burned. It's a common way of disposing of it. Most of the body just gets consumed in the fire, some little bit nothing. So, what is it if we as beings are simply a conglomerate of chemicals, then what's good or bad about anything ultimately? If you have a flask with some chemical in it, and you break the flask and all the chemical spills, well, we may also say that's bad, it's not very good, but it doesn't have the same moral impact. It doesn't incite revulsion in us as the murder of a child might have. In law also, even in an atheistic country, if someone smashes up a car, that's considered a crime. If it's someone else, well, especially if it's someone else's car. But if you smash up someone's body, that's considered a worse crime. Why? The car is a machine made of chemicals. The body is a machine made of chemicals. Why do we put so much stress on the body being more important than a car? Why do we naturally feel it wrong if there is unfairness in the world and want to speak of that? That's maybe the most gruesome example that could be given of torturing little children. Why? What's wrong with it? The very sense of right and wrong suggests that there is something more than simply chemicals. Unless we take this all as one big delusion, everything's just a big delusion. But if we think like that, then we might feel justified in torturing little children. We might think like that. What does it matter? What does it matter? We may think like that, but anyone who has any sensitivity, which isn't something that you can measure by any scientific instrument, will understand that to think like this is horrible, inhuman. Certainly it's wrong to torture children, and there are many, many things which are wrong. I'm just giving that as an example. Another example of metaphysical belief in people who claim not to accept anything to be supernatural, metaphysical, supernatural, similar terms, is belief in the Big Bang, which is said to be a singularity. Singularity is another way of saying a miracle. It doesn't happen according to ordinary laws of nature. It just how, why, from what it happened, no explanation. What happened, what was there before the Big Bang? It's considered a non-question. Time began. So that, in that sense, it's supernatural, and as much as it can't be described It can't be ascribed to any scientific laws. So this is all metaphysical. Now, so far I've spoken about the topic of the talk is beyond scientific and religious dogmas, discovering reality. Now, what is reality? So far we spoke about, well, I spoke a lot about science, and I guess I should speak a little bit more about religious dogma. That by religious understanding, people, they see the world through those eyes. We tend to see the world through those eyes. For instance, one person sees a tree, and they see that they may not think about it, but for every tree they see, but if they start to think about it, they'll think, well, this tree came about due to natural selection. And they'll see everything in the world, and even how humans behave with each other and interact. They want to explain it all in terms of, ultimately in terms of evolutionary theory, anthropology and culture. It's all derived from man's desire to survive and to dominate and to enjoy. So everything is explained with that worldview. Now, if a theist may see a tree, well, there are different kinds of theists, I'm sure there are different kinds of scientists also, but I'm not so much up on that field. Someone may say, well, the tree is put there by God. It looks very nice, and it gives us oxygen, it gives us fruit, it's given by God to us. Another kind of theist would say that that is a living being in that body who has taken that life form because of some previous action, because for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, which happens on the subtle or karmic platform also. So everyone sees everything through their worldview and how people behave with each other. Some people will say that, well, there are basically two classes of people. One class has found the truth in Jesus, and the other class are just inspired by Satan, so everything they say is all wrong. And of course there are others who will say that, well, Satan, yes, and Jesus, just one of the prophets, and the last prophet is Muhammad, and they see the world through this worldview. Everyone has a different worldview. But beyond all these different worldviews, there is reality. There are certain facts. And they do, although we try to fit everything within our worldview, and we try to explain everything that we see, touch, taste, smell, feel, and hear, according to our worldview, the reality is independent of what we presume it to be. For instance, people often ask me, do you believe in reincarnation? And my standard first response to that is that it doesn't matter whether I believe in it or not. Because if it's a fact, it's a fact. And if it's not a fact, then there's no amount of believing in it will make it into a fact. It's either a fact or it's not a fact. It's not that if you believe in it, it happens, and if you don't believe in it, it doesn't happen. Similarly, is there God, one God, or many gods? It's not a question of belief. It's either a fact or it isn't a fact. Reality is independent of whatever we may consider it to be, unless we got it right. So, how do we find out that reality? Well, that's really what science and religion are both striving for. In this little talk, I've been talking about science and religion as different fields, which they, to a large extent, operate differently. I'm speaking in general terms here, so forgive me for for that. So both are trying to understand reality, which shows that we as intelligent beings, we have an innate desire to try to find out what is the meaning of life. There are many people who are simply satisfied to work in a job if they can get one, come home at night, turn on the TV, go to sleep, get up the next morning and do the same thing. And many people are content with that. Those who are not content with that, they search for more meaning. And the universe, as we can observe it, or everything in nature, everything that we see, it suggests that it does have meaning. The very fact that there are scientific laws waiting to be some discovered, some waiting to be discovered, some that will, in course of time, have to be modified. This suggests that there is meaning. If there's no meaning, then how is it all so ordered? We can say it comes from simply by chance. But then why are we so concerned to find out? Why are we so concerned to find out? I mean, the very fact that we search for meaning suggests that there is meaning. And even if we say that there's nothing beyond evolution, then why are we so anxious to communicate that to others? The meaning, we are by nature meaningful people. It suggests, just like if we're thirsty, it suggests we have a real need for water. If we're hungry, it suggests there's a real need for food. So the search for meaning and the order of the universe. Now, you may say, I think this is going a bit beyond logic. It's a bit of a leap of faith. But if we don't make some leap in some direction, we can't make any progress in understanding. Just like if you go to the university to study science, you don't science or what? Some discipline within the broad field known as science. You start off with some faith that there's something to be learned. You don't know what you're going to learn, but you have faith that there's something worthwhile pursuing here. From what little we've seen of it, we have faith that it's worth pursuing. So that there is meaning in the universe suggests that, and that we try to find out that knowledge about it, suggests that there is knowledge and that it is understandable. But at the same time, we are very tiny living beings. We have a very short life. We are in a very tiny part of the cosmos.